This is a true crime podcast. It contains adult themes and content and may not be suitable for all listeners. Listener discretion is advised.
When a guard would stop and talk to you, you used to stand back and you would yell so people could hear what you were saying to that guard as they walked by or within the vicinity.
But he knew what a convict was going to do before they thought of it themselves. He just been around that long, and he was tough.
They'd find Sprocky in about every conceivable place you could imagine, which we would, of course, dump.
They'd wait until everybody was locked up, and he would open his door and run down to cell one and get a bugler can full of Sprocky and take it back to his cells.
She had a kind of a hypnotic power. There were a great many wild cats around the penitentiary, and most people couldn't get near them. But she would stand in the doorway of the cell house and say, "Kitty, kitty, kitty," and those cats would go to her.
Welcome, folks, to a very spooky Stool Pigeon Saturday. My name is Anthony, and today we have a special guest. Samuel, here in the trenches here, is going to tell us a very scary story of Idaho history, and we are chatting with Sky out in D.C. Hi, Sky.
Hi. Is he a special guest if he's always the host?
That's a good question, Sky.
I think it's a special guest because we could have anybody on a Stool Pigeon Saturday, and Sam isn't talking about a resident of the old Idaho Penitentiary. He's talking about somebody else outside of this institution.
And I think this is his first, he told me, story outside of, the 1880s?
I know. I'm going out of my comfort zone here.
So you know what, Anthony? You are right. He is a special guest because he is doing not his normal stuff.
Okay, you all ready?
I don't know.
I know. You've been really building how actually dark it is, so I don't know. Maybe not.
You've been alluding to it in the office quite a bit, so I'm really excited. This sounds like many good horror movies, and I've been trying my best to watch a couple this month. So, watched VHS Halloween last night.
How was it?
I liked it. It was pretty gory, and there's some pretty bad ones, but I love those found footage horror movies, so it's right up my alley. So, yeah, I liked it.
Hocus Pocus is definitely a Halloween thing. I could probably do like a Nightmare Before Christmas combo. But yeah, Halloween, I miss the dressing up aspect of Halloween. But as an adult, Halloween is like kind of legitimately scary, and horror is really making a resurgence right now.
I went to the Idaho Film Society. They're doing all month long classic horror, and I watched Nightmare on Elm Street, which I haven't seen since I was a kid. So that was like, wow, it was really good. I really liked it.
It's cheesy but fun, and it's a product of its time.
Totally.
I will say I am going to go, I guess I forgot, like classics. There is a branch of the American Film Institute out here, and they are doing the original Nosferatu with a live music orchestration. So it's a band who actually does silent movie music. They're amazing. And then they are also doing the original Frankenstein and the original Dracula on Halloween back to back. So I might, if I have that day off, might go see that. So that I might actually watch.
I love all horror movies, but I especially love the classic Universal monsters. Sky, on my behalf, please go and take pictures. That sounds like a dream come true.
All right, well, let's hear it. I think you're excited, Sam, so let's do it.
William Withington awoke on a cold winter morning, January 2nd, 1928. William was a 23-year-old rancher living in Baker, Idaho, near Salmon. 3 years earlier, he had married Velma Baxter, a Utah girl 3 years his junior. Since then, they had been making a home together in Lemhi County. Their 2 young sons, Robert and Harvey, were both under the age of 2. I'm not a father, nor have I ever worked on a ranch in the 1920s. But if I were to guess, I imagine William spent that morning tending to his daily responsibilities of their home and his 2 small boys. At some point, however, Deputy Sheriff Lewis Bancroft and Leonard Cummings stopped by his house. Deputy Bancroft was investigating a robbery of a store in Tendoy, Idaho, involving Bert Lee. Bert was a large, quiet man who mostly kept to himself. He worked on ranches in the summer and as a trapper in the winter. Though he had lived in the area for about a year, he'd never truly become part of the community. For all intents and purposes, he remained an outsider, a stranger. Deputy Bankoff, age 64, had a bad feeling about the situation. After 28 years in law enforcement, he'd learned to trust his instincts. So despite this being a seemingly straightforward arrest, he enlisted the help of Leonard Cummings and the young father, William Withington. Bankoff swore them both in as special deputies. Perhaps William kissed Velma goodbye. Maybe he ruffled the hair of one of his sons before stepping out into the snowy afternoon to help with what should have been a routine arrest. All I know is that once William stepped out of that door, his wife and boys would never see him again. It's Halloween, a time when many of us tell scary stories. Over the years on this podcast, we've shared plenty of Halloween specials, from the spirits of the penitentiary to monsters and cryptids of Idaho to ghosts of the Idaho Territory. Just last year, we spoke with real paranormal investigators from Big River Paranormal. But this year, we're taking things in a very different direction. Tonight, we're going to tell the story of Ben Hamilton. This is not a scary story. This one is downright terrifying. Sharing a story like this often risks overshadowing or minimalizing the victims. I'm going to do everything I can tonight to recognize the real human beings who were killed and harmed by Ben Hamilton. This story also touches on aspects of mental illness, which I do not want to sensationalize or to spread fear about in any way. But all the same, I do want to share this Idaho story because it should not be forgotten, even if it's going to be a hard one to tell. If someone had told me this story before I researched it myself, I don't think I would have believed them. It sounds like an urban legend. I wish it were, but it isn't. Every part of this story and the lives it shattered is tragically real. Listener discretion is advised. Benjamin Harrison Hamilton was born in Bledsoe County, Tennessee, in October 1885, the fifth of 12 children. Bledsoe lies in the southeast corner of the state, not far from Georgia and North Carolina. This land was originally occupied by the Cherokee Nation, before settlers moved in the area, forming the county in 1807. Interestingly, despite being part of the Deep South, this region actually opposed secession during the Civil War. Despite its high humidity, this area is not swampland, but rather rugged and mountainous, home to black bears and cougars. Remote with a population of fewer than 12,000 people, the environment presented many challenges to those who made their homes there. There is very little information available about Ben's early life, but we do know that at the age of 27, he was sentenced to what newspapers refer to as Lion's View, which was the East Tennessee Hospital for the Insane. I do not know why he was sent there. According to his attorney, Albert Allen, years later, Ben's first sentence was the result of him shooting and killing a coworker. Allen is actually a fairly reliable source, but I was personally unable to verify this supposed murder. On February 22, 1913, Ben was declared partially cured and returned to society. He left the asylum in 1914, and at age 29, he married an 18-year-old local girl named Martha Ann Roberts. Together, they had one son the same year who they named Melvin. Her parents, James and Daisy Roberts, seemed to have some misgivings about their marriage. Due to domestic difficulties, Martha left Ben and moved back home with her parents. In January 1915, Ben showed up at the Roberts home with 2 guns. Her father, James, disarmed him and sent him on his way. an act that only deepened Ben's growing resentment towards his father-in-law. Meanwhile, arrest warrants were being written up for a man named Ease Swafford. On January 3rd, he attacked a woman in Spring City and tore off her clothing before she managed to escape. The charge placed against him was attempt to commit murder, and Deputy Sheriff Dunn and 2 other officers rode to the Swafford cabin that night to arrest him. As they rode up, Swafford and his accomplice Bob Walker fled. The officers pursued Dunn in the lead and on horseback quickly began to run the men down. Swafford swung around with a shotgun and fired a round of buckshot into Dunn. Dunn fell from his horse, dead before the other officers caught up. Swafford escaped into the mountains, and the city of Pikeville was left to mourn Wesley Dunn. Martha's father, James Robert, referred to as Esquire, meaning lawyer, was a close friend of Dunn and attended his funeral on January 25th. As the family wept and the community gathered to pay their respects, Ben Hamilton arrived and made his way through the crowd of mourners. When James Roberts saw Ben drew his pistol and fired. The first bolt struck James in the shoulder. As the unarmed man tried to move behind a tree, Ben calmly stepped around the obstacle and shot James 3 more times in the chest and the head. Then turned to the screaming, horrified crowd and said evenly,
"You see, I killed him in self-defense. I had to do it."
James Roberts died a few painful hours later, at the age of 39. Ben did not resist arrest. The sheriff took him to Pikeville's jail. On February 21st, one of Ben's brothers stopped by the jail to bring him provisions. The officers were out, and when the sheriff's wife ordered the trustee to open the door to let the brother in, no one seemed concerned. Ben shoved the trustee aside, bolted out the door, leapt over the fence, and disappeared into the river and the mountain before anyone could stop him. Deputy Sheriff Gibson led several officers in hot pursuit, and on February 26th, they finally found their man. Ben ran, abandoning his rifle and shotgun as he went. After about half a mile, Gibson caught up to him.
"Don't hurt me."
Gibson assured him no harm would come, taking the frightened man by the hand. And in that same moment, Ben drew his pistol and fired. Gibson dodged the bullet as it whizzed past his head and reached for his own weapon, but Ben pressed the muzzle of his gun against Gibson's temple.
"Throw down your pistol."
Gibson complied. Ben snatched the gun, took 15 steps, then turned and opened fire. Gibson dove for cover as Deputy Myers and Hughes, who just caught up, fired their rifles. Ben returned fire and amid the chaos, managed to escape once again. Before more lead could fly, Ben's brothers tracked him down and convinced him to turn himself in. This time the sheriff took Ben to the Chattanooga jail, where he shared a cell with Ease Swafford and Bob Walker, the same men who had killed Wesley Dunn. On October 2nd, 1915, the court adjudged Ben Hamilton legally insane and sentenced him back to Lions View Insane Asylum. Before leaving the jail, Ben supposedly declared,
"I will not be taken alive again."
Lions View Hospital, however, was already struggling. Understaffed and underfunded, it had officially stopped admitting new patients. The Knoxville Sentinel reported,
Applicants are now being denied admission to the Eastern Hospital for the Insane due to the uncomfortably crowded conditions. There are now 675 persons at the asylum, and this number is reported to be possible only because of the opening of the new $15,000 hospital building.
Apparently, they did make an exception for Ben. Dr. Campbell, the asylum's superintendent, was sometimes criticized for allowing his patients too much freedom. But he stood firm in the belief that
this is not a prison.
Escapes did happen, but since the institution's opening in 1883, only 2 people had ever successfully fled the facility and avoided recapture. That number was about to change. On the night of October 28th, a new employee forgot to lock the door on the patient's room. A simple mistake with devastating consequences. A group of patients slipped through the unlocked door, reached a window, sawed through the bars, and used knotted blankets to lower themselves to the ground. 4 men escaped that night. William Hambright, Hugh Crabtree, Arthur McDaniels, and Ben Hamilton. The first 3, Hambright, Crabtree, and McDaniel, suffered from paranoia, general paresis, and epilepsy. While unwell, they were considered harmless, as Dr. Campbell later clarified. Only one of the 4 escapees he warned should be regarded as dangerous.
Ben Hamilton is a very large man, fair complexion, blue eyes, and light hair.
Again and again, newspapers described Hamilton the same way, by his size and strength. Those were his defining attributes. Now he was on the loose once again. That October, Knoxville, Tennessee, like much of the rest of the United States, was preparing for Halloween. Though the holiday had ancient Celtic roots in the festival of Samhain, many of its familiar modern traditions were beginning to take shape during this very era. The local YMCA hosted a Halloween party for children. The Cherokee County Club threw a grand masquerade ball, and across the city, households advertised parties of their own. The Knoxville Sentinel even ran an article on proper party etiquette, reminding readers of the importance of serving cider punch and having little festive cakes on hand.
If you are simply acting as hostess to the children of the neighborhood who march in costume from house to house, demanding pennies and cakes, you must still have cakes of an unusual sort on hand.
While the term trick-or-treating had yet to come into use and wouldn't become a widespread practice for another 15 years, you can already see the tradition beginning to take root. The Johnson City Staff News even published some Halloween superstitions.
Don't bring no ghosts in the front, come around to the back door.
Upon All Hallow Eve, a great unrest takes possession of the spirits of the dead, and of all nights of the year, this is the one upon which supernatural influences most prevail. Then the spirits of the unhappy dead wander abroad in evil company, mischief-making elves, witches, and even in some cases, the spirits of living persons have temporary power upon this dreary night to leave their bodies to mingle with the ghostly crew.
By the time October 31st arrived, 3 of the 4 escaped patients from Lions View Asylum had been recaptured. Only one remained unaccounted for. As young couples danced under flickering lamplight, as families gathered in parlors for parties, and as ragamuffin costumed children went door to door asking for pennies and cakes, Ben Hamilton remained at large. And sadly, the violence was not over yet.
When you get too hot for comfort and you can't get ice cream cones, ain't no sin to take off your skin, dance around your bones. When that lazy syncopation of the music softly moans, ain't no sin to take off your skin, dance around your bones. The polar bears ain't green in Greenland, they got the right idea. They think it's great to refrigerate while we cremate down here. Now just like those bamboo babies from the South Sea tropic zone, ain't no sin to take off your skin, dance around your bones.
Let's step away from the humid Halloween in Tennessee and into the cold winter night in Montana 3 years later. By all accounts, Alexander Duthie cared deeply for his little family. Born in Scotland in 1879, Alex had worked hard to build a stable life in Montana. He was a foreman for the Northern Pacific Railroad Company, a Freemason, and man with many friends in the community. The pride of his life was his wife, Edith Parnell, and their 2-year-old son, John. Edith, a 29-year-old English immigrant, was pregnant with the couple's second child. It was December 17th, just a week before Christmas. One imagines this young family in high spirits, bundled against the cold, thinking of the holiday ahead. That evening, Alex and Edith stepped out for a short walk. Alex pushed little Johnny in a stroller while Edith walked behind him. Suddenly, another man stepped out of the darkness and grabbed Edith by the arm. She laughed at first, thinking it was a friend being playful, but when she turned, her laughter turned to screams. Alex spun around to see a large, long-haired man yanking his wife off the sidewalk. He let go of the stroller and rushed forward to intervene.
Are you a German?
Before Alex could answer, the man pulled a gun and fired. The steel cap bolt struck Alex in the chest and lodged into his spine. Edith screamed as the stranger fled into the night. Neighbors rushed to help, and within 15 minutes, Sheriff Al Robertson and the deputies crammed into the small automobile and burnt rubber in pursuit. The full moon lit up the snow-covered ground, and the suspect, wearing a purple mannequin jacket and cap, was easy to spot. Less than a mile away, they found him in Yellowstone Canyon.
Throw up your hands.
But the man didn't comply and instead fled. The officers chased him down and cornered him. And when he lunged for the sheriff's belt, trying to seize the sheriff's knife, Robertson struck him, knocking him to the ground. The man, first identified as Bert Lee, confessed almost immediately. He said that he
killed the Kaiser who was out with my sister.
Moments later, he changed his story. Alex was
a man who was out with my wife.
Then, without prompting, he claimed to have killed his own grandfather, only to passionately deny it seconds later. Before deputies could even book him, he attacked the sheriff again and was knocked down. He got up and attacked again, only to be knocked unconscious. That was how the investigation into Alexander Duthie's death began. The man calling himself Bert Lee had been in Montana since the summer, working as a ranch hand. He'd even applied for a hunting license. But as the officials looked deeper into his background, they discovered his true identity was Ben Hamilton. The gun used to kill Alexander Duthie was found along the railroad tracks, smashed to pieces by Ben himself. What Hamilton did between his escape from the Tennessee asylum in 1915 and his reappearance in Montana 3 years later remains unclear. Some newspapers claimed he killed others during those lost years, but there is no solid evidence to confirm this. Nor can I verify the reports that his mother and his 4 sisters were committed to asylums themselves. What can be confirmed is that both of Ben's grandfathers had died before the turn of the century, making it unlikely that he'd killed either of them. At the Livingston jail, Ben was held alongside Martin Kelly, accused of poisoning ice cream, and Mary Boyd, charged with murdering her husband. But Ben proved to be the most unruly of all of them. He cycled through long stretches of silence, refusing to eat or speak, followed by violent outbursts described as
the rage of a wild animal, a crazed man with staring eyes and restless feet.
He alternated between denying any wrongdoings and blurting out new confessions to murders he immediately retracted. Some accused him of feigning madness to avoid the gallows, and many law enforcers said he was more cunning than he let on. But when the Eastern Tennessee Hospital for the Insane was contacted to see if they wanted him back, their response was curt and unmistakable.
As you have him in charge and under a grave charge, keep him.
On May 3rd, 1919, the district court declared Ben Hamilton criminally insane and sentenced him to the Warm Springs Insane Asylum. He had $900 in his bank account, which the court ordered transferred to the institution to help cover his care. 5 days later, on May 8th, Edith Duthie gave birth to a baby girl. She had been so grief-stricken after her husband's death she couldn't even attend his funeral and was sent to be cared for by her mother in Cheyenne, Wyoming. The baby girl was named Margaret. While in the asylum in 1922, Ben Hamilton claimed to have witnessed 2 guards kill another patient at the facility. The 2 guards denied this completely, while other patients who witnessed the shocking crime told a very different story. John Ernest French married Maud Davis at 29 years old, but after a decade together, French began to struggle mentally. In 1921, he was admitted to the Warm Springs Insane Asylum in Anaconda, Montana. There, his family hoped that the doctors would help him recover enough to return home. However, in the case of John French, the hospital would ultimately fail both him and his family. At this point, the asylum held 265 patients, and the guards struggled to subdue the less cooperative individuals. So they enlisted help from another patient, Ben Hamilton. True, Hamilton could be a little rough at times, but his strength easily took control of any situation. For his help to the guards, he was granted greater freedoms and privileges within the hospital. On July 21st, an especially combative patient, Mandus John Hindinger, gave the guards too much trouble. Ben Hamilton proceeded to beat Hindinger into submission, then continued to beat him some more, and then some more. By the time Ben was finished, Hindinger's ribs were broken so badly that the bones punctured his lungs. And yet this was not even the worst act of violence committed that day. The conflict started that morning in the dining hall. John French, who was not known as a violent patient, ate his breakfast with a spoon. When Lee Perry asked that French hand his spoon over to another patient, French refused. Having not finished his meal, Perry grabbed French and began to drag him to solitary confinement, or the hole. French tried to fight himself free. Guard A.E. Evanhan and Ben Hamilton rushed to assist Perry. They did not take French to solitary. Instead, they took him to the shower room, where they began to beat him. Ben wrapped a towel around French's throat and pulled it tight. French lost consciousness. Ben loosened the towel. French awoke, and they beat him again, tightening the towel once more until he lost consciousness. They repeated this again and again until French ceased to move at all. John French's death was estimated to have occurred around 7:30 in the morning. In the investigation that followed, all involved told different stories. Guard Perry and Evanhan blamed John French's death solely on Ben Hamilton. Ben blamed the guards. The 4 patients in the shower at the time testified that all 3 men had worked together to beat and choke French to death. At first, it appeared that the hospital would have to answer for some very serious crimes. Dr. R.J. Hathaway responded to the scandal by saying,
"When a patient dies and no doctor is present, I always call the coroner and the county attorney for my own protection. The case is in their hands."
But after the coroner, Dr. Kendrick, refused to list a cause of death, the case was dismissed, and all charges pending against the 2 guards were dropped. John French was buried behind the hospital in an unmarked grave, just one of the 3,260 graves that remain behind the building to this day. 1 year later, on June 26, 1926, Ben Hamilton escaped from the Montana State Insane Asylum. The Livingston Enterprise published a notice of his escape.
Last night, this man made his escape from the institution in a manner not as yet to be determined. It is presumed that he's wearing a dark hat or cap, dark coat, and possibly corduroy trousers or laundered overalls. He may be carrying food in one of the institution's pillowcases. Born in Grapevine, Tennessee, height 5 feet 8 inches, age 37 years, weight about 220 pounds, hair light brown, eyes light blue. His eyes will impress the observer because of their peculiar expression. Upper front teeth prominent with gold. For some time past, Lee has been in robust physical health and is rather noticeable because of his physique and broad shoulders. Although there has been some improvement in his mental condition, we would advise that caution be exercised by any officer attempting his capture.
The hospital, however, failed to ever recapture Ben Hamilton. It was 1927. Calvin Coolidge was president. Showboat premiered on Broadway, and Charles Lindbergh flew from New York to Paris.
Yeah, and Irene Dunn is the actress who opened it, so yes, thank you for throwing that in there for me.
Of course you would know that. Of course, Guy.
He, I have a PhD in one little thing.
We always appreciate that expertise.
And I appreciate you throwing things in there just for me. It's very kind.
Due to the new laws and regulations under Prohibition, the Idaho State Penitentiary population would soon grow to 408 by the following year, which required the shoe factory to be reconverted into 3 houses to accommodate more prisoners. New technologies were rapidly changing the United States, but here in Idaho, many remote towns still lacked electricity and plumbing, and many of the residents still relied upon horses. Halloween celebrations that year were even more commonplace than they had been in 1915. Besides dances, parties, and pranks, newspapers also published poetry. The Burley Herald wrote,
"Come join your friends at candlelight this eerie night, this fiery night, this scary night, when ghosts are white and awesome revel at their height."
The Kellogg Evening News added,
"Hark! Did you hear that sound in the grass? Maybe a witch or a ghost did pass. Was that the owl's lone cry? Is that the wind in the trees? What voice is whispering in the breeze? Are spirits really nigh?"
Another paper described the season.
Halloween, a time of feast and frolic, of dancing and parties, of lighthearted fun for all. A time when owls hoot, witches roam abroad, and black cats prowl. A time of mirth at many firesides, when children bob for apples and corn pops on the fire. Prepare for Halloween. Chase gloomy shadows far away and invite mirth and laughter to rule for the evening.
Many enjoyed the holiday here in Idaho in 1927. But that same year, a stranger arrived in Salmon. After spending the past year in Big Hole Basin, Montana, he rode into Salmon on horseback. At first, no one seemed to put too much notice on him. Quiet, kept to himself, and almost unremarkable, if not for his large size. Now it appears that we've returned to the beginning of our story, to that cold, snowy day on January 2nd, 1928. When Deputy Sheriff Lewis Bancroft recruited Leonard Cummings and the young father William Witherington to help arrest a stranger named Bert Lee. These men could have had no idea what they were up against. 30 miles north of Salmon, these three men rode their horses up to a cabin near Tendoy, Idaho. As the sun set a dark red behind the mountains, there they found Bert Lee, better known as Ben Hamilton. The officers surrounded him and announced they were placing him under arrest. Ben, calm and thoughtful, agreed to go, but asked if he could get some money and warm clothes from his cabin first, to help fight the winter chill. They stepped into the dark cabin, and as Ben gathered his things, Deputy Bancroft used the telephone to radio in the news of the arrest. Ben reached under his bed and pulled out a rifle. He turned and opened fire. 3 quick, sharp movements, and all 3 men dropped to the floor. Leonard and Bancroft were dead within seconds, but William still clung to life. Ben shot him again and again, then placed the muzzle of the gun against the young father's head and delivered one final shot at point-blank range. Later, Ben described the scene by saying,
"He was wiggling on the floor, so I shot him through the head. Tend his misery."
Ben then looted the bodies of all 3 men, taking their money, guns, and ammunition. Now armed to the teeth, he stepped outside, mounted a horse, and rode east into the night. Within a few hours, the Salmon Sheriff's Department learned of the murders and began to mobilize. Sheriff Stewart and Dan O'Connelly drove an automobile to the scene of the crime, arriving at 9 o'clock. By lantern light, they examined the horrific crime scene. Ben, who'd moved around the cabin a great deal before his departure, left dozens of bloody footprints in his wake. Little did Sheriff Stewart and O'Connelly know, as they examined the scene, that Ben was watching them. From just above the ridge he sat and smoked, observing the officers from the darkness. He could see them, but they could not see him. The next day, investigators found 8 cigarette butts on the hill above the cabin.
Ugh, that's so creepy. All of that is so creepy. And then you walk up on the hill and you find 8 cigarette butts in one place, like your stomach would just, ugh. Oh,
yeah, that,
okay.
I mean, that feeling of being watched while you're looking at such a gruesome scene. Oh.
At midnight, Floyd Mason and Martin Curry saddled up and began to track Ben's trail through the snow, leading towards the Sharkey Hot Springs, where they found Ben's abandoned horse. The pair rode through the night and began to close in around 9:30 the next morning. Ben saw the manhunters and picked up speed. Mason lifted his rifle and unloaded 8 bullets, the closest one grazing Ben's metal cup in his pocket. Ben dropped into Rattlesnake Gulch and disappeared. Meanwhile, back in town, a massive posse was forming, We've already spoken of William's wife and 2 children, but Leonard also left behind a wife and 2 children in their early 20s, and Bancroft left a widow and 2 high school-aged girls. The small community was outraged at the loss, and a posse of over 100 men quickly formed. Among them were Dan McPherson, D. Matlock, Charles Warren Snook, brother to our warden, John Snook. On January 4th, 1928, salmon rancher Gus Swanson heard a noise in his barn. The cowboy went to investigate, but to be safe, he decided to take a shotgun along just in case. As Swanson walked through the snowy yard, Ben Hamilton watched from the darkness inside the barn. When Swanson approached, Ben stepped forward, rifle raised. Swanson, seeing the intruder, threw up his shotgun. Ben fell back, shot through the chest with a load of buckshot. The hunt was finally over, ended by a man who wasn't even riding in the posse. Swanson slowly approached, but as he walked close, Ben grabbed his rifle and sat up. A second shot from Swanson, this one to Ben's face, and it was over for good. Ben, still alive but barely, watched as first the sheriff arrived, followed by an angry crowd. The posse, now large and out of control, had turned into a mob bent on lynching the murderer.
Let them come. I could kill some of them yet.
But the sheriff had no intention of letting lynch law take over. He fought the mob back. When Dr. Charles Hanmer, not only the doctor attending to Ben, but also the mayor of Salmon, arrived, the doctor-mayor knew it was up to him to stop the crowd. After a tense confrontation, Hanmer talked the angry mob down. Later, he recalled,
I don't remember everything I said, but I talked fast for a few minutes when I arrived at Swanson's ranch and found the bunch with a rope around Hamilton's body. They proved a good bunch of fellows and finally saw my way, though it was pretty hard for some of them. They all knew the boys who lay there dead from Hamilton's gun.
In the end, the group agreed to let justice take its course. However, after loading Ben into the automobile, the sheriff and the doctor decided to drive him to Chalice instead of Salmon to avoid any more angry citizens. But in the end, it didn't matter. Ben Hamilton died on the drive. Later, Dr. H.A. Bolton, superintendent of the Montana asylum, confirmed Bert Lee's true identity.
I'm sure that Hamilton is Lee.
Ben's body was taken to the undertaker. One by one, the lawman, the doctor, and the posse members all went back to their individual homes. But that night, there were 3 homes and 3 families to which no one would be returning. 3 families whose lives were permanently altered by those tragic days, and a community left with scars that remain to this day. In the weeks that followed, the newspapers ran wild. The stories made headlines throughout the Rockies and stayed on the front pages in Montana papers. Attempts to account for all the dead left in Ben Hamilton's wake quickly became conflated, and he was soon accused of every unsolved murder in the West, along with the deaths of his wife and children. Most of this was untrue. Based on several hundred pages of research, here are the victims I can directly connect to him. James Roberts, Alex Duthie, John French, Deputy Sheriff Lewis Bancroft, Leonard Cummings, and William Withington. That's 6 men who left behind 6 widows and 13 children who lost their fathers. And yet, the story does not end there. Back in Tennessee, after Ben Hamilton murdered her father and escaped from the asylum, Ben's wife Martha attempted to pick up the pieces of her life and move on. She eventually married Joe Hamilton in 1917, Ben Hamilton's younger brother. Together, Joe and Martha had 1 son, whom they named Billy. Joe passed away from an illness in 1922, and later that same year, Martha remarried, this time to William York Rector. Then on the night of November 18th, 1922, deep in the woods of Tennessee, an unknown assailant stepped into Martha's cabin and shot her husband Rector, and Rector's elderly father. The father's body was found in the yard. Martha's in her bed, and her husband's on the ground beside her. All 3 were shot multiple times, at close range with a shotgun, their remains completely mutilated. The sheriff investigated but could not find any suspects, no motive, and no clues. The triple murder remains unsolved to this day. Now, I know for a fact that Ben Hamilton was in Montana during the summer of 1922, because that's when he killed John French in the asylum. While he did have an unusual level of freedom with the guards and certain freedoms of the hospital, I'm doubtful that Ben Hamilton was responsible for these murders in Tennessee. However, while he may not have killed these particular victims, I do strongly believe, based on his many confessions and his history, that he is responsible for more deaths than we can accurately account for. Perhaps many more. I'm not an expert in serial killers or in mental illness. There is much discussion about where those two areas intersect and where they do not. But speaking only from my own study of this case, it's hard not to feel that the hospital Ben Hamilton was sent to could have helped him, if only they'd the understanding of mental health that we do today. The hospitals may have failed Ben, but they most certainly failed all of Ben's many, many victims. It sounds like an urban legend. I wish it were, but it isn't. This tragedy was very real. In 1915 in Knoxville, Tennessee, just before Halloween, a man escaped from the Lions View Insane Asylum. And the consequences, for so many, were truly terrible.
Ain't no sin to take off your skin, dance around your bones.
Sources for this episode today are newspapers.com, finditgraves.com, familysearch.com, and ancestry.com, as well as the books Insane, America's Criminal Treatment of Mental Illness by Lisa Roth, and Trick or Treat, A History of Halloween by Lisa Morton.
So he's like a serial killer. I mean, that's what we would call him today.
Oh, absolutely. He would 100% be Idaho's forgotten serial killer.
Whoa.
Yeah, I mean, did he have any motivation? Did it mention anything other than circumstance and angry and...
You know, I've actually been thinking about that a lot. At least one that was revenge-driven, his father-in-law. Two that were reactionary in the asylum and killing the law enforcement that came to arrest him. And then there was one death in which it was completely random. The man walking his pregnant wife who was shot down for absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
And so with those different motives, it does appear to be very disjointed from each other.
Mental illness, maybe.
Yeah, no, seriously.
Totally.
Well, and I know that, like, not all serial killers are considered mentally ill, but some are. In this case, like, something was not working out there.
So clearly, right. You know, not even the fact that he was in an asylum. It seems that maybe that was perhaps an appropriate place for him. The way that he would, like, pretend to be dead, like, let people approach and then get him, that's so scary. Like, that's
so nasty.
That's something deep and scary.
Totally.
Like, what were some of the stories in the newspaper? Was there, like, a general fear of, like, there's somebody randomly killing? Or was he was caught pretty quickly after each one?
A lot of that terminology of, like, madman on the loose.
Okay.
Especially after the escape before Halloween.
Yeah.
You see that a lot in the papers. And with that one, too, it's like, okay, I know everyone's out having Halloween fun, but, like, be careful. This guy will hurt people. And yet, at the same time, the 3 years that are unaccounted for, the $900 in his bank account, that baffles me. Because, like, he must have had a job. I don't know. That speaks of such stability that these other moments seem to lack.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Wow. I have not come across this story, so it's so fascinating.
Yeah, you weren't kidding. It's pretty rough, but a perfect Halloween story indeed. There were some definitely creepy parts. So yes, well done. As always, Sam.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
And look at that. You can do stories from outside the West.
I know.
You did great.
This made me want to do more 30s stories because I can use radio broadcasts in the podcast episode.
Wow. Well, awesome job, Sam. I love that. That's perfect for this time of year. Very spooky, but real, which is even scarier.
Yeah, spooky Halloween, everyone. Be safe. Have fun.
Yeah.
Be safe
I think
out
that's
there.
it from the East for now.
Excellent. Well, tonight is the last night of Fright Nights at the Old Pen. It is 18 plus, adults only. So if you're listening to this to get in the mood, you'll be able to come and watch Sam tell some more spooky stories at the Old Pen.
And we'll have a haunted house. We'll have thriller dancers. We will have a lot going on. So if you're hearing this the day it comes out, come spend some Halloween time with us here at the penitentiary.
Yeah. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for listening. Do your own time.
Do your own number.
Happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween.
Spooky Halloween.
Special thanks to voice actors Tristan Hafer, Olivia Copen, Jerry Broad, April Clark, Rob Goodwin, Kane and Shawnee Scaffer, Draven Brown, Jack Horcade, Virgil Clark, Emily Blair, and Jake Jepson.
If you enjoyed Behind Gray Walls, please rate, review, and subscribe so others can find our podcast. If you're interested in more Old Idaho Penitentiary information and to see mugshots of the inmates featured in this episode, follow the Old Idaho Penitentiary on Instagram and Facebook. If you want to learn more about the Idaho State Historical Society and its other sites, follow ID State Historical Society on Instagram or visit history.idaho.gov. If you have a question or comment for the hosts, please email us at behindgraywalls@gmail.com.